Give you all a word, and that word is this very important word: perspective. Perspective. I want you to imagine with me if you were looking at a large mural that covers an entire wall, and somewhere on that wall mural is a tiny, tiny detail that you and I are hung up on. Let's say it's a tiny flower hidden somewhere in the grass section of the mural, and the grass section of the mural is but, let's say, 10% of the mural. So 10% of the mural is green grass with some flowers. You and I are hung up on this one tiny flower somewhere in all the green grass that covers 10% of the mural. Now, why are we hung up on this one tiny flower? Maybe we are hung up on it because we are absolutely fascinated by it. What an amazing little flower that is. Maybe we're hung up on it because we have questions about it. There are things about that flower that we just don't understand. But no matter what the case may be, we find ourselves talking and talking and talking about that one tiny little flower. Now, there's nothing wrong with you and I talking about that one little flower for a while, but our focus on that one tiny flower should only go on for so long. And once it's gone on for long enough, let me tell you what we need to do. We need to stop. We need to clear our minds of all the discussion we've been having about that one tiny flower. And what we need to do is back up and see the entire mural. Be reminded what it's all about. Behold the grand scheme of it all, aka the big picture. What does it mean to see, to remember, to stay focused on, to keep in mind the big picture? That is what you call having perspective. And having perspective is in contrast to that which is the opposite of having perspective, not being able to see past the moment. The details of the book of Revelation, those details are absolutely extraordinary, but as extraordinary as each one of those individual details is, Revelation is more than just a collection of extraordinary details. I once heard this expression, and it stayed with me, that such and such, whatever it is you're describing, is more than just the sum of its parts. More than just the sum of its parts. It's not just A, B, and C that happen to be together, like a salad with a bunch of things that don't go together. It's how they work together to make something more than what they could be on their own. The book of Revelation is more than just a collection of extraordinary details. The book of Revelation is more than just the sum of its parts. The book of Revelation is the culmination of the entire Bible. We need to keep our eyes on the perspective of what is going on here, because what is going on here is what we've been waiting for the entire time. Revelation is not simply about itself. Revelation is about, by virtue of being the culmination of, everything that came before it. The book of Revelation is what every one of God's people have been waiting for since Eden. Now, the details of Revelation, those same details would be extraordinary if they were found anywhere else in the Bible. But what makes those details so extra special is the role that they each play in the grand scheme. And in Revelation, the role that they play is concluding human history and concluding the entire plan of God from the beginning. We need to stop and regain our perspective of that and what it is that's going on here. And that is why chapter 10 is a pause in the action. Chapter 10 is a pause in the action that calls on us to step back and look at the big picture of what it is that we are beholding. Chapter 10 brings us to remembrance that what we are experiencing here, what we are reading about, is what the entire Bible has been building up to. Chapter 10 comes right after chapter 9. In chapter 9, you have scorpion monsters that come out of the bottomless pit. You do. In chapter 9, you have 200 million fire-breathing horses. Those are absolutely, unbelievably extraordinary things to talk about, to meditate on. But we must stay focused on the purpose of all the details, of all the extraordinary things, and the role they play in God's plan, rather than just solely on the details themselves. And that is why chapter 10 casts our eyes on the big picture, calls on you and I to not just get swept away in how sensational it all is, but instead to remember the weight and gravity of this moment. This is one of the three parenthetical sections of the book of Revelation. I say parenthetical, like you have a sentence, and then suddenly you have parentheses, taking you away from the main body of the sentence for a moment, giving you a bit of context elsewhere, so to speak. And then when those parentheses have concluded, the sentence then continues. I use the term parenthetical section. I have heard other folks use the term in the middle of the play, mission. Thank you. Intermission. Sorry for my brief intermission in explaining that word there. Okay. I have heard other people call them intermissions. And that's okay. It is an intermission from like the action going on earth, but you're still getting revelation. So I prefer the term parenthetical section as opposed to intermission. But whichever term you use, there are three different parenthetical sections in Revelation that all come in between judgments. And the first one happens in between the sixth and seventh seal judgment. And that parenthetical section in between the sixth and seventh seal judgment is chapter 7, which we talked about last Sunday evening. And then, in between, or not and then, skipping ahead for a moment, in between the sixth and seventh bowl judgment, you have a very brief parenthetical section, which is chapter 16, verses 13 through 15. So as you picked up on, these parenthetical sections always happen in between the 6th and 7th of each one of the 3 sets of 7 judgments. And here, starting with chapter 10, you have the intermission that takes place in between the 6th and the 7th trumpet judgment. And this is the longest of the parenthetical sections, because it not only includes the entirety of chapter 10, but also almost all of chapter 11. So, but tonight, only focusing on the first half of this parenthetical section in between the 6th and 7th trumpet, you have chapter 10. Verse 1 says, "And I saw another angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head. And his face was as it were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire." Now, throughout the book of Revelation, John occasionally says, "I saw." So he says, "I saw," then he describes a whole bunch of what he saw. Then suddenly he once again says, "And I saw." So it's almost like a comma, a break a little bit. It is introducing us to a new vision. Whenever John says, "And I saw," we know that there's something of a break between what he's been talking about and what he is now talking about. So, here we are introduced to this angel, and now we come to the million-dollar question concerning Revelation chapter 10. There are 2 million-dollar questions here in chapter 10. This is the first million-dollar question: whether or not this angel actually is Christ. Now, one thing's it's fair to say that what the angel says and does sort of sound like Christ. So that would be one reason for saying this angel is Christ. Another would be the description of the angel in verse number 1 is somewhat reminiscent of the description of Christ from Revelation chapter 1. And it certainly is also true that in the Old Testament, you have the, quote, angel of the Lord. And in the Old Testament, whenever it says angel of the Lord, even though it says angel, when it says angel of the Lord, all caps, that is in fact God himself appearing as his own messenger. And then you could also say, I suppose, that the word strong here does imply a distinction between this angel and the 6 angels that just blew the 6 trumpet judgments so far. So, right there are a few reasons why some folks say this angel is, in fact, Christ. Now, the point is not worth arguing about, but here are a few reasons why I believe this is, in fact, an angel, not Jesus Christ himself. And the first one is the word another. He uses that word, another. If Christ were going to show up and be called an angel, I simply cannot fathom that the Holy Spirit, writing down in the inspiration of Holy Scripture through John's hand, would choose to refer to that angel that's actually Jesus Christ with the term, quote, another. Here is another angel. There is no way Christ should be referred to that way. And speaking of that word another, it's translated from the Greek word allos. And that Greek word allos, it means another of the same kind. Even if you were going to have a Greek word that could mean another, and that was to be translated in English, there would even be other Greek words that would at least hint at it meaning more than just, here's another of the same kind of thing. So the language and the use of the word another says to me it's an angel, not actually Christ himself. Here's a second reason. Whenever Christ appears in Revelation, John always gives Christ an unmistakable title. He shows up and he's called the faithful witness, or the Lion of the tribe of Judah, or the first and the last, or whatever the case may be. There is no such title here ascribed to this being that makes it sound like Christ. Number 3, I said earlier that the use of the word strong does set this angel apart from the angels he has just been talking about. While that is true, this is not the only angel in Revelation that's called a strong angel. Chapter 5, verse 2 made reference to a strong angel. Chapter 18, verse 21 will make reference to a strong angel. And nobody claims that those angels are Christ. So if this is Christ, it strikes me as a convoluted and confusing way to refer to him. However, even though this angel is not, in my opinion, Christ himself, that does not change the fact that this angel is a direct representative of God Almighty, and as such is a direct reflection of the power and glory and very nature, such as holiness and justice of God. Other angels represent just one specific detail. For example, the 6 angels that just blew each one of the 6 trumpet judgments so far. Each one is representing something very narrow, that specific judgment. Each one is representing something very narrow, something very niche, something very specific, and as such, they're probably slightly less glorious. It's not to say they're not glorious, but slightly less than this one. But this angel is more glorious because of what he represents. He represents the grand picture of it all. He represents that which is the whole enchilada, the plan of God. Now, therefore, his appearance is a direct reflection of the nature of the one he is there to represent. And so, we see the appearance of clouds and a rainbow. Those two elements, clouds and a rainbow, they represent both sides, so to speak, of the book of Revelation. Judgment and blessing. Wrath and salvation. Justice and mercy. Death and life. You have clouds. Clouds are associated with judgment many places in Scripture, but right here in Revelation, certainly back in chapter 1, verse 7, clouds are associated with judgment. Behold, he cometh with clouds. And that's not a happy thing for the world, because that verse goes on to say, and the whole earth will wail because of him. And you have, for example, Noah's flood. And obviously there are many similarities between the deluge of Noah and the judgments of Revelation. Well, in the flood of Noah, clouds brought rain, while the rainbow represents God's mercy. So the clouds versus the rainbow represents God's judgment and God's salvation. And later on, here in chapter 10, we are going to see Revelation being presented to us as being bittersweet. So that's very much an emphasis of this very chapter, seen in the clouds and the rainbow. And then this angel also represents God by virtue of both illumination and purification. You have the light of the angel's face. And I will remind us that Moses shone brightly like a light bulb, so to speak, after being in the presence of God. And so this angel comes from the presence of God. But the light of the angel's face exposes all truth wherever he goes, while his legs, being pillars of fire, means the angel also purifies the presence he is in wherever he goes. So also God, through the tribulation period, is shining a light on man's depravity while simultaneously judging man for his depravity. Now, in verse 2, we have the little book, and we see that the angel is representing the fact that Christ is going to reclaim the earth. Verse 2, and he had in his hand a little book open, and he set his right foot upon the sea and his left foot on the earth. So, the first $1 million question was whether or not this angel is Christ or not. And the second $1 million question is whether or not this is the same book that we are introduced to back in chapter 5. The book of chapter 5 represented Christ's kingdom coming to earth, with the opening of each seal representing the judgments that must come to earth before you can have the second coming and the glorious kingdom. And yet, the book here in chapter 10 is called little, while back in chapter 5, it's not called little. Now, here is one way of seeing that. Here is one interpretation of what this means. I will first direct your attention to the fact that the book in chapter 5 was sealed. We're told Christ is worthy to loose the seals and open the book. And then the book here in chapter 10 is referred to as already being open. So that checks out. Christ was going to open it. Now we see it already opened. But that leaves the question, why is it smaller? So here's a way of looking at that. A lot has already happened since chapter 5. The seal judgments are behind us. Essentially, the trumpet judgments are also behind us. And so it makes sense that the reason why this book is little now is because it only comprises what is left. The bowl judgments are yet to come, but they happen very rapidly. And so, in light of the big picture, it's virtually time for Armageddon. That is why the book is little. There's far more sand in the bottom half of the hourglass now than there is in the top half of the hourglass. And this little book represents the sand still in the top half of the hourglass. Christ is about to reclaim the earth. And this is why this angel serves as his ambassador to herald his coming, which is about to happen, and pictures Christ's dominion, or is a picture of Christ's dominion, by virtue of putting one foot on the land and 1 foot on the sea. Now, that implies the angel's size as being some sort of a giant. That would be an implication. At the same time, it's not anything John emphasizes or even mentions. So is this angel huge? Yes, he probably is, which again would be a reflection of God's grandeur or the weight of the moment or the power and presence of God. But yet John doesn't go there, so we should not emphasize that too much. Now, you have the word see. I must point out, elsewhere in the book of Revelation, the word see is used in a way that would be up to interpretation. Elsewhere in the book of Revelation, it would make reference to the sea, and good people could disagree on what is meant there by the sea. However, I submit to you that in this particular case, sea is being contrasted with the land, with the dry ground, with the earth. And I think that makes it pretty clear-cut that here the word sea is simply referring to literal ocean, and that Christ will take back the entire earth, ocean and land, from the devil and set up his kingdom very soon. Verse 3, and cried with a loud voice, as when a lion roareth. And when he had cried, 7 thunders uttered their voices. So this angel represents Christ's power, but you see the word cried. You see the word loud. You hear it compared to the roar of a lion. I don't know about you, but when I picture a lion roaring, I don't picture a lion roaring because, well, I'm a lion. I guess I'm supposed to roar, so I guess I'll roar now so I can cross that off my list of things to do today. A lion doesn't roar apathetically. A lion doesn't roar so reluctantly. A lion roars because he feels his roar. He has an emotion at stake in it. He wants to roar. So I just want to say that even though the lion's roar here represents Christ's power, it also would represent Christ's passion as well. Christ is not only powerful, he's also passionate in all that he does. But focusing on the power, there is a purpose in nature to the roar of a lion. It is to intimidate other animals, whether it's a fellow lion or anything else. The purpose of a lion's roar is to intimidate other animals. So also this angel's voice is meant to make us all tremble at the majesty of God. So think of this angel as being sort of like the warm-up act, meant to prepare the crowd for the main act. Now, we're going to be told what the angel said, but we will not be told what the thunders uttered. What we can put together about that which was uttered by the 7 thunders is that the word 7 does represent completion, while thunder represents God's judgment. God is about to wrap up his judgments of the earth. But first, completion, he must complete it perfectly. The land and the sea will be redeemed, but not before first being fully and perfectly judged. Verse number 4 informs us, or maybe I should say reminds us, not all mystery is revealed. To just use a colloquial expression, God is going to keep a few surprises up his sleeve. Verse 4, and when the 7 thunders had uttered their voices, I was about to write, and I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, seal up those things which the seven thunders uttered, and write them not. The book of Revelation has been transparent about a million things. The book of Revelation has told us a million things that we would have no way of knowing if it wasn't for the book of Revelation. Yet God, in giving us so much, wants to at the same time keep us humble. One way he does that is by reminding us of a very simple truth. You can study prophecy day and night and think you have everything figured out, but there will be details or there will be aspects to the final days of human civilization on earth that's going to go in a way you would not have ever guessed. Boy, I did not see that coming. I did not know God was going to do that or do it like that. I will say the fact that these things are being communicated through thunder does imply that they are aspects of God's judgment on this world. Something to do with that. But beyond that, any speculation of what the thunders said would be utterly pointless. Now we come to verses 5 through 7. The point of verses 5 through 7 is basically this. Okay, get ready. Get ready. Meaning that's the point. Get ready. We're almost time to go. There will be no more delay. That which God's people have been waiting for has finally come. Verses 5 and 6. And the angel which I saw stand upon the sea and upon the earth lifted up his hand to heaven, and swore by him that liveth forever and forever, who created heaven and the things that are therein, and the earth and the things that therein are, and the sea and the things which are therein, that there should be time no longer. Now, when verse 6 says there should be time no longer, that doesn't mean time will no longer exist. Book of Revelation is going to make reference to a period of 1,000 years. Well, that is very much literal time. Time will still exist, but it means there is virtually no more of it to transpire between this moment and the second coming of Jesus Christ. Doesn't mean it's going to be literally right this second, but it is so soon. Verse 7 makes clear that verse 6 is referring to the time in between the seventh trumpet judgment and the battle of Armageddon. That's what verse 6 is referring to. Verse 7. But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, so the ending of the seventh trumpet judgment, which then leaves only the 6 bowl judgments. But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished, as he hath declared to his servants the prophets. Now, I want you to think about that expression or those words. The mystery of God, mystery, it's been slowly revealed throughout the whole time, layer by layer, but now, the mystery of God, it is now time that the whole thing be finished. Here's what that means. Here's an expression to reflect what that means. All loose ends wrapped up. Get ready. All loose ends are about to be wrapped up. Verse 7 is most directly hit nail on the head what I meant by this chapter returning us to the perspective that this book is the culmination of the entire Bible. As it says, as he hath declared to his servants, the prophets. The mystery revealed to all the servants, the prophets, is now about to be finished. The prophets is referring to the Old Testament prophets. What it's saying is the Old Testament prophets, they wondered what exactly it was going to look like when their prophecies were fulfilled. And now it's sort of like they're all watching from heaven, seeing exactly how God is putting it all together and wrapping it up. The faithfulness of God from Adam to Abraham to Moses to Isaiah to the prophecies of Christ and through Paul are now all coming to a point of absolute and utter fulfillment. The final fulfillments of the age are just about to happen. And so we come to verses 8 through 11. And here in verses 8 through 11, we see exactly what it should be like for any Christian to read the book of Revelation. And the immediate context of verses 8 through 11 would be chapters 12 through 19. Because from the seventh trumpet judgment until the second coming of Christ, that's all that's left. That's what the little book would be made of at this point. Would be like those 8 chapters or so. Look at verses 8 through 11. And the voice which I heard from heaven spake unto me again and said, Go and take the little book which is open in the hand of the angel which standeth upon the sea and upon the earth. And I went unto the angel and said unto him, Give me the little book. And he said unto me, Take it, eat it up, and it shall make thy belly bitter, but it shall be in thy mouth sweet as honey. And I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it up. And it was in my mouth sweet as honey, and as soon as I had eaten it, my belly was bitter. And he said unto me, Thou must prophesy again before many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. You have all heard the expression that we use to describe anything of which we want to convey this idea that such and such is, quote, bittersweet. Very often it's referring to some happenstance in our lives. So how do you like so-and-so, or what such and such? And how do you like your new job, somebody might say, or something like that. How do you like your new house, your new car, whatever? And someone might say, well, it's bittersweet, meaning, yeah, I'm sad that the old is behind me, but yet happy that the new is ahead of me. That's always the idea, is that there's both good and bad, both positive and negative, happening simultaneously. I'm torn. That's the idea. Up until now, the book of Revelation has focused squarely on the positive results of God's judging civilization as he has been. Those positive results being the fact that it vindicates God's justice, it brings him glory, it reveals himself. The world is experiencing who God is at this point. One thing's for certain, he ain't being ignored. That right there is going to bring you and I great pleasure and great satisfaction. That will be very, very sweet. But at the very same time, though, and I would say for the first time in Revelation, emphasis is being put upon us feeling sadness at the cost of it all. We are glad that God is doing all that he is doing. We are cheering him on. We are glad he is doing it. Yes, God, you are right. You are right. This is right. This is good. But we are not callous to what is happening to the lost. The apocalypse is bittersweet for us because we are happy for God and we are sad for the lost. Now, it's important that we remember that we see from this chapter. This is not just simply how we happen to feel. This is how God intends for us to feel. Because the angel says that's how he's going to feel. Sweet in the mouth, but bitter in the stomach. The reason why that's important, because it shows us that that's also how God feels about it. But bittersweet though it may be, it must continue. The glorious thing that God is doing is exactly, though it have its sad aspects to it, it is right, it is exactly what he must do. Thus the chapter ends with John being told, yeah, there's a bitter side to all of this. But no matter how weighty, no matter how sober and somber, you must continue to prophesy, because God has more to say. God's will must be done, and the truth is, the gospel is both happy and somber. For you and I rejoice for the saved, and we weep for those who die without Christ. Because the bitter truth of God is truth nonetheless. And only the truth will save anyone or bring God any glory. And therefore, it is true. If you serve God with your life, it will be both bitter and sweet. There will be happiness and there will be sadness. But in the scope of eternity, we will be glad that we were faithful to the truth. And so tonight, if God is pressing upon your heart to be faithful to the truth, knowing that there will be a cost, knowing it will not every moment will be happy, not every day will be a victory, not everyone will be saved, not everyone will love you. It will be hard, it will be terrible at times, but you keep your eyes on the eternal perspective. Keep your eyes on the big picture. It will be so worth it when Christ reclaims the earth. As we stand to our feet and sing this hymn of invitation together, as the Lord is speaking to your heart tonight, you come forward and kneel at this altar.